The idea for this came to me like a flashbang. Deadass, like. But yeah, I know all of the people who commented "be pressed today" on my Guess What This Is post are tweaking out right now because I am indeed making a set of jewel beetles this time. Yes. I wanted to make jewel beetles, but actually bejeweled. I wanted to turn "be pressed today" into "be pressed to slay." Right. Would you believe that my tried and true method of making a tinfoil base and covering it with clay blew up on me? I mean, literally, it blew up on me. But we'll get to that later on in the episode. Here, I'm doing what I always do, which is snipping away the excess and rolling the edges smooth, but I guess I let too much air get inside when I was making it. So if you want to make this, don't let too much air get between the clay and the tinfoil, I guess. I'm planning on making 7 of these, with 3 being for you guys, but to save me time and energy and my mental graces, I thought I'd whip out the mold star for this, so that I wouldn't have to make 7 jewel beetles one by one. Instead, I'm making 2 types, as you see here, with one being smooth for the rhinestones, and one being a lore accurate jewel beetle with all of its glorious trypophobia holes. Because these 2 would be used to make the molds, I wanted them to be as well done as a 5-star steak, and I mean, they come out as well done as a 3-star chicken fried steak, but at least it didn't come out like a 7-day-old 7 a.m. 7-Eleven hot dog, so that's really all that matters. I made the eyes, used my pointy tool to make all the seams straight, and no, I'm not slipping or losing motor function in my hands. I'm purposefully adding the curve that you see on a lot of jewel beetles. Next, I'm slicing the sides of the face to give it that tried and true buccal fat removal that most bugs have, before, lastly, putting in the wires for the antenna, which are more for marking where the antenna will go on the mold, kind of like an X marks the spot kind of thing. As I said before, only one of these have the dots, so I added those on in an effort to make the dots look simultaneously symmetrical, but also random. Symmetrically sporadic, if you will. See? She blew up a little bit. Not a fan of that. I'm finna sand, of course, but first I had to take out the antenna and deal with this hindrance of a bump. I don't think I filmed the story of this as well as I should have, so for once I'm going to do my best to explain what's actually going on. So first I sanded to see what's really the 411, but that actually created a hole from how thin it got, so I filled the air pocket and patched the hole with fresh clay. While that was cooking, I went ahead and sanded the other jewel beetle, and once sanding was done, I took my drill and went over some of the holes so that they would have more uniform of a look. When the miscreant came out of the oven, it still had a bump, but smaller. So I tried carving it away and patching it with clay again. And with that in the oven again, I thought I'd play around with adding some thighs that would eventually hold some legs. I was genuinely spitballing with a lot of the ideas in this video that I did not go through with. What can I say? I just like to keep you on your toes. So this time, it inflated itself so much that it actually split down the middle, which is actually fine, because I used some tweezers to hold the split open while I superglued that puppy closed. I sanded it to look semi-normal, then whipped out my drill tool using these specific drill bits to kinda add back in the seam. It's kinda ugly, it's giving 3-star at the moment, but we'll make it work. Okay, so Metro Boomin' make it boom. Time to make the molds. First, we hot glue the barrier so that the mold star has 0 means of escape. By the way, all the items I used for this are in the description. Next up, I used 2-part Mold Star 30, which has a cure time of 6 hours. And I know what you're thinking is, Sydney, isn't this supposed to be done in a well-ventilated area? Yeah. But I had work the next day and needed these to be made expeditiously. But in my rush, I made one crucial mistake. I didn't hot glue the beetles to the glass mat. So, they kept rising to the surface, which means I had to start over. So, I had to shamefully pick them out, pour the mold star back into the silicone measuring cup, scrape the remaining mold star out of the barrier, wipe it out, clean off the beetles, and then super glue them down. From there, it was business as usual, and I didn't bother cleaning up the mold star that got on the mat because 1, I'm lazy, 2, my mom finished making dinner, and 3, it's a rubber mold. I could just peel it off once it cured in 6 hours. After taking off the clippy clamps, I used my grown woman paint scraper to take this off, and during that process, I sliced my hand open. Ew! It did in fact bleed, and it did indeed leave a scab, so I think it's safe to say I'm basically a blue-collar worker now. Yeah. Moving outside to the well-ventilated outdoors, it's time to make the molds with this 2-part SmoothCast 300. I poured about 80 milliliters total, which is 40 milliliters of each part, then did the mental math of remembering how much milliliters was left over and subtracting that from however much milliliters is left over after pouring the first mold so that I could get the precise number of how much milliliters is needed for each side. Then I didn't write any of that down anywhere. So if you've ever wondered, is Xacto Clay smart? Well, then I made 7 of those. Not to pull your tails or whatever, but you're about to see a sneak peek into an alternate universe where I make legs for these things. So I started off drilling proper holes into the hole spots I made in the mold. Then I bent a piece of wire in half and threaded it with some beads. I really do like making legs like this. The first time I did it was on my Lapras beetle, but for these, I thought it would just be too visually overwhelming and it would have been 42 beaded legs I'd have to make. I also decided that I just hated how the thigh parts came out. It was much too big for the beaded legs, and that was my final straw, so I popped them all off. This left me with nasty choppy parts on the sides where the thighs were brutally ripped off, so I left my bug making crypt to go to my friend Dan's house, we love Dan, where he helped me to sand them all down on the sides so that you never would have known that they were supposed to be legs there in the first place. No, I'm not addicted to sanding. I can stop whenever I want. I'm just softening the rough edges, I swear. But don't ask me why I still marked and drilled the holes for the legs. I was still not intimidated enough by the potential of making 42 legs, but immediately after drilling them, I was like, no. No. Also, I love using my drill, so that was probably part of the problem. Using my drill to add back some of the holes that got sanded off at Dan's house was a good idea though. Time for my first ever uninspired paint job. Wow. The rhinestones are what's going to carry this team on their back, so the paint job is going to be rudimentary. These molds came out with lots of bumps and slashes and scrapes, but the rhinestones cover all of that, so you never would have known. If you don't follow me on Instagram, I'm going to correctly assume you're a square who didn't see my teaser post I mentioned earlier where I invited people to guess what bugs that I'm making. And even though I already said that almost everybody got the right answer, which is of course swagged out jewel beetles, a handful of people even correctly guessed the exact species because my followers and subscribers are genuinely the coolest people on the planet. And of the 4 jewel beetle species I chose to rhinestone, the one I decided to start off with was the 8-spotted jewel beetle, aka Beetles octogutata. At first, I was going to add the rhinestones in a cluster and work outward, but I realized it would be more efficient to make them as organized as possible, so I started with a straight line down the middle and continued making lines from there. What would become my modus operandi would be to complete the entire thorax before moving on to the abdomen where the patterns would be. The reason I started with this one was because it had the simplest pattern of the 4 I chose, so I used it to come up with my pattern schematic for the others, and because it has only 2 colors and 8 spots, this was a good choice for setting up the learning curve. The first learning curve was, as you can see, I started putting down the white rhinestones, but they barely had any contrast against the blue, so I tore them off. The ones that had dried from a few days ago were much harder to get off, so be sure to do this in one sitting if you can. Once they were off, I carefully painted the exposed areas before going back in with the white rhinestones. Wow. Here's what I mean by pattern schematic. Since all of these are from the same mold and therefore have the same measurements, it's safe to say that the amount and position of each rhinestone will be the same as well. So, I counted up the visible rhinestones from a top view angle to make this handy dandy schematic here, which will help me visualize the patterns going forward, including the pattern for this lovely banded jewel beetle. It probably would have been easier to buy one of those tools for gem paintings to do this, but I had already entered a flow state and therefore was incapable of driving the 8 minutes to Hobby Lobby. Instead, I did the bootleg version, which is dabbing a teeny tiny amount of tacky glue onto the end of my tool here so I could pick up the gems and then place them on the tiny line of tacky glue that I laid out beforehand and use the pointy tool to squish them as close to each other as possible. Now that we've learned from the whole white dots thing, I thought it would be beneficial to paint the bottom half purple just to ensure the clear distinction between the purple bottom half and the cream top half. I didn't think it was all that necessary to do this for the purple strip at the top, but I'm glad I did it for the bottom. Okay, yeah, on to the next one, which is Cassiarina octomaculata, aka my personal favorite. New jewel beetle means new schematic, so I rubbed that one out, pause, then scribbled in the new pattern. This way, I could go down in a straight line, placing the rhinestones as the pattern dictates without a second thought, and therefore be able to completely zone out during the entirety of this 2-hour quantification process. Yup, the only thing on my mind was, happy birthday, turn my swag on! Because swag is a gift, and for these babies, it might as well be Christmas. Last but not least is the yellow spotted jewel beetle, aka Buprestis confluenta. And since this one is pretty #crazy #random, I extended the schematic to include the sides too, because picking the rhinestones up randomly and hoping for the best just left too much a chance and made me exceptionally nauseous at this thought. Also, shout out to this person for literally taking the time to guess the specific bug species of all 4 of them. This made my day, along with the people who guessed corn. I liked it. Lastly, we're just rounding out the final details, including the eyes, the antenna, and the underside. I loved making these so much that I even added them to my Etsy page because yes, I've always had an Etsy page, and it just recently occurred to me that I should promote that bad boy more often. So if you want to get one, go get one, because I can use my schematic to make any jewel beetle. It doesn't have to be these. It could be the red spot jewel beetle. It could be the golden jewel beetle. It could be any jewel beetle that your heart desires. And of course, you could order a custom bug like the others I make on this channel, because I'll make any bug you want, even bugs that don't exist. You tell me, man. The world is your oyster. The last true step of these Y2K divas is, after drilling the holes for the antenna and super gluing them into place, I went back outside for the second time this year to give the entire face a coat of resin. My antenna don't usually hold up with glue alone, so I've started using resin to hold them in place forever and ever, amen. And since I wanted the eyes to be nice and glossy, I figured I might as well just do the entire face at that point. And then we're finally done. But Sydney, didn't you say you made 7? Well, yes, I made 4 for me and 3 for you to show my undying appreciation for my subscribers. I'm going to raffle off these 3 shiny jewel beetles and automatically enter each person who comments on this video, with each comment earning you 2 entries. The official raffle details will be announced on my Instagram and on my YouTube community tomorrow. So check that out, and if you want to see the full process of how I made these, I'll be posting those too sometime soon. But yeah, that's all this time. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you for the next one. Bye!